Good. Paul, I want to start with you. This movie premiered at South by Southwest last year, so obviously you've lived inside this project for a while. Does it feel like making it was a distant memory? How arduous has the trek been to get it out to the world now that it finally is here or about to be here?
Well, I was doing the editing and the music which is why it took so long to do the post. Actually on Apple software, Final Cut and Logic. So, but that wasn't a plug. No one told me to do that. But it feels like birth, I guess. I don't know what birth is like, but what I imagine it's like, where the pain is kind of part of the reward when it finally happens.
And now that you've experienced the birth, how easy is it do you think it will be to watch it grow in front of the world?
I imagine like a parent, when the kid finally goes off to college, you kind of want to move on and do something new.
Katie and Luke, I want to talk to you guys about, this is an interesting movie because you have to chart through so many cycles of emotions and ups and downs, and I'm curious, on any given day when you show up to the set, how do you channel how high your character's highs are and how low their lows are, so that your performance stays as grounded and specific as they end up being?
Well, we were really fortunate because Paul is a wonderful director, and also because this movie is based on his real life experiences. We could depend on him to help us measure those highs and lows. But also, I mean, we had time to really prepare and really rehearse. So, you look at your week's work on Sunday, and you kind of get ready, and Thursdays that you map it out. So it's you try.
What of Paul's personal experiences did he share with you in how to approach these characters and the project that you guys would create cohesively? Did you guys have questions about what living with the condition is, and what discussions came out of that?
Yeah, Paul and I spent a lot of time walking around the city, just kind of getting to know each other and sharing our own, life stories. And he, of course, has a lot to relate about his experience. A lot of the time, it's just very specific experiences. Some of it's very, sometimes humorous experiences, sometimes very scary experiences. So yeah, that was very, I think, useful in the building of it all. Yeah.
And when I read this script, I was so moved by the honesty of the piece. And then when I met Paul, he informed me that it was based on his life experiences in it, and told me even more. And I was so inspired by his passion and what he's gone through, and also this ability to celebrate and to offer another perspective to so many people about this illness. And I think it was just really inspiring and something that I wanted to be a part of. And Paul gave us so many books and shared a lot of stories. And I still have a lot of poetry books, because our characters are, we are more than our illness. And I think that's the theme, one of the themes of this movie. So there was a lot went into it.
Katie, your resume spans so many different types of projects, and I'm curious if a role like this, where you have an obligation to the writer whose personal life is being put onto the screen, compared to some of a lighter, more like studio comedy, a Jack and Jill, a Mad Money, does the role affect you more than certain others do? Do you approach it differently in that sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was a dream role because there's just so many layers, and it was an opportunity that I hadn't had, like, this before, and it was a lot of work, but it was so liberating and wonderful because the environment that we worked in was so freeing, and Paul let us improvise, and Luke was incredibly supportive, as was everyone in the cast and the crew. So we were all able to explore this story that everyone on the set was very, very passionate about.
I think we will go to a clip now. Are you comfortable watching yourself in this context, Katie? I'm always curious of actors, how do you, is it weird to process? You know, you lived inside this experience and now here it is in a more glossy format for anybody to absorb.
I watch it and I appreciate greatly all of the work that Paul and our editor did. I now have a whole new respect and appreciation for the amount of time and love that has gone into it. And we really had a great time making this movie, even though it was very intense. And I'm just happy that they found things that work. And also watching it, I'm always blown away by Christine, and she's such a great actress. And you know, that's who I'm watching when I watch it.
Well, I want to talk about Christine and the depiction of all of the parents. Paul, how important, what was your approach in deciding what the parents' roles in the story would play? You write them very sympathetically, and I'm curious, how much did you draw on your own experiences for that aspect of the movie, and what did you want to get across about the parents' role in navigating this type of situation?
Well, first and foremost, I wanted, it's very easy to make the parents the villains in these kind of movies, but I wanted to create well-intentioned parents, so if there were any well-intentioned parents in the audience, they'd be able to see themselves through their children's eyes and hopefully open up a dialogue. But you know, each parent has a different relationship with their child, which is reflective of what happens. So, you know, in Marco's case, he's extremely wild, and they have a backstory with their mother, which often happens genetic, and you know, his relationship with his bipolar mother is being mirrored with his relationship with his father, who, you know, and so in his case, it's a very common thing where the father's trying to reason with someone who's crazy, and how do they reason with someone who's crazy? And he goes very, very crazy, and with Carla, it's a different situation, which is very, very common, which is that you have a strong relationship with a parent, and you know, you're using that parent to try to cling to who you used to be, and who she was as a mother beforehand, and how she's changed since she doesn't have the same daughter, and how that person saves their lives in a way that's life-saving and crippling at the same time when you're trying to mature beyond that.
There are so many scenes, both of your characters have intense scenes with your parental figures, and there are so many scenes between the two of you where the mania of the characters' personalities feeds off each other. The dialogue is so kind of tit for tat, back and forth. You're sharing ideas. There's just this energy to the scene. And Paul obviously knew so well how to stage that, and how to. There's a lot of like kind of soaring camera work in those scenes where the two of you are like in the hospital, kind of bouncing ideas off each other. When you're going through that and making it so naturalistic, and then cut is called, what? Is there like an energy depletion? What's the next moment that's going through your minds when you're working yourselves up as these characters, and then all of a sudden the scene is over?
Well, we kind of kept our energy up the whole day. You know, you kind of learn to do that in any job you're on. You become very aware. I mean, this job, it was almost like you had to be in shape. It was like a sport, and you know, because you were creating so much emotion. But we kind of stayed at a pretty high level, just to, you know, you don't want to like completely relax and then
It's
go
also
right away.
like very exhilarating getting there, and you don't really want to come down right away. So it's sort of, the drag of it is being told you have to go home sometimes.
Does the naturalism of those scenes, does that come from rehearsal? You mentioned that you were able to rehearse a lot, which a lot of movies don't have that advantage. So I think, for example, the scene, I know people haven't seen the movie, but there's a scene in the hospital where you guys are really just in this intellectual kind of just sharing ideas, and it moves very quickly, and the dialogue is very rapid. Is that a byproduct of rehearsal, or does it just come naturally?
Well, I think what was really exciting about making this movie, and we were allowed to have the time to figure out the characters and figure out their rhythms, so that we kind of knew the rhythm we were trying to achieve. So it made days like that and scenes like that, we knew what the goal was, and that's like 90% of the battle, when everybody's on the same page. And then we just kind of went for it. But there's it's nobody wants to hear, we all prep. I mean, it's like there's a lot that goes into it before you get to the set.
There was a lot on the spot too. Like for those scenes particularly, I thought it was extremely important not only to improvise, but to be given stuff before each take, because at that point the set was designed in a way that everything had not a man-made meaning, almost a celestial meaning that you could project your mind onto. And when you're manic, you have a million connections going through your heads. There's 12 hours in the day. There's 12 disciples, 13th hour is Jesus, all these kinds of crazy connections. And so there were lines in the script, but they had a goal in that moment to go out to space, to the planet they belonged. And I would flood their mind with like a whole bunch of stuff and just say, go use that stuff to go out to space. And they would improvise with it and cycle around and finish each other's sentences. And between each take, they had another flood of stuff that they would take in and go play with.
Interesting. Is that easy for you guys? Have you been on a set where every take like that for a series of takes as you're throwing something a new kind of hurdle?
It keeps it fresh. I mean, it keeps because you're improvising, because you're not sort of following a script. You're sort of allowed to become more paint-like, and you can just sort of throw texture and color the director's way, and they get to determine later what to do with it.
Yeah, and it adds more energy to the scene. It's like, oh yeah, it's kind of fun to have something new to try, and so I liked it.
Jeremy and Paul, I want to ask about, Paul, you're such a multitasker with this project. Is that, you wrote, co-edited, directed, and scored the movie. Is that because it's your baby, or between the two of you, can you answer, was that about ensuring that you had the financing that you needed and didn't have to recruit certain people or whatever it would take to get a independent movie like this financed the way that you needed it to be?
I mean, I love doing it all, honestly. I mean, I just enjoy it, and I think that's the beauty of film, is that there's so many different art forms that synthesize, and to me, the fun of it is you get to do so many different kinds of stuff. But yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a financial decision. He wanted to, and some of the rest of the creative team behind the movie was, to be honest, nervous of him doing the score because he'd never scored a movie before. And we were saying, well, we could get this person, and there's some interest in potentially some people coming on board. And he stuck to his guns, and the score turned out incredibly well. It's actually being Lakeshore is putting the soundtrack out on CD in conjunction with the release of the film. But he went through the process of sort of teaching himself the program to be able to score the movie, and did a phenomenal job.
actually, Katie gave me some confidence on set. She was asking me to play the little piano stuff that I did before I got into all the scoring. She's like, it helps me get in the mood. I'm like, okay, I can do this.
It's good.
You guys,
I mean, Paul is brilliant. So we were very, very fortunate, and this was one of my favorite movies that I've ever been a part of. And I felt like, as an actor, it was so creative and a wonderful on so many levels. And to be a part of something that has so much meaning is really rewarding.
you guys mentioned backstage that there were paparazzi issues on the set. Tell me about that.
How about the East Village gang paparazzi wars? You can get into that.
I'm not sure I'll talk about that, but yeah, I mean, it was a challenge. These two had to really dive within to get to these characters, and one of the things they would look to me for is to give them sort of a set where they felt safe, and the paparazzi were not the nicest to deal with. I mean, they would say, if you don't let us get our shots, we're going to call cut in the middle of your take. And so it was a matter of trying to navigate through that. I mean, we had one day where we had Katie and Luke in the Washington Square fountain, and it was the day before NYU graduation, and there was probably 200 paparazzi lining the.
But it was still one of the best days ever. It was so fun.
I know, you said that to me at the end of the day.
And that water was so cold. It was good.
It was 100 degrees out there, and you guys jumped in and went full commitment to doing that scene.
I've gone back like 4 times.
And went in the fountain again?
Yeah. I mean, I don't stand where we stood, but I'll swim with the kids.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you said at the end of that day that was one of the most amazing days of your life.
Yeah, I loved it.
Wow. And we were nervous as to how that was going to go.
I recommend go to Washington Square Park, not tonight. It's a little cold, but in the summer.
And await the paparazzi to come capture you as you do it.
You know, in terms of them being able to focus on their process and whatnot, on certain days, I was staying in an apartment in the East Village, and I gave up my apartment so they could do hair, makeup, and wardrobe in our apartment, so we didn't have trailers on the street, so the paparazzi wouldn't necessarily know we were there. But by the second half of the day, someone would Facebook or tweet and go, hey, you know, they're shooting this in East Village, and then they would descend upon us, and we'd have to deal with them accordingly.
It was astounding because they're playing crazy, uninhibited people. They have to be totally uninhibited and blind to what people think, and they did it so naturally in front of these paparazzi, which were right in their face, as if they just managed to. Maybe they really did go manic. I mean, they got into a manic state where it was easy, but their performances are so like melting their flesh away, literally just kind of uninhibited fire. It was beautiful.
Do you guys feel used to that? I mean, you've been around for a while. Do you guys just feel like that's just par for the course at this point? In an unfortunate way.
I don't think my opinion on that has anything to do with selling this movie, but I just have to say it's wonderful to film in New York City, and we've had a lot of great locations, and New York is so much a part of these characters and this story, and I think that because this city, you are in each other's lives, and you walk by all different kinds of life, and you can very easily dismiss someone because they're a little off or they make you uncomfortable. And hopefully this movie makes you maybe have a little more patience and understanding and empathy. That's what it did for me.
All right, let's see another clip. Can you guys talk, maybe whoever feels inspired by this question, can you guys talk about the artists that the film also pays homage to? I mean, you'll see at the end there's a series of dedications to, I mean, Ernest Hemingway and Vincent van Gogh, and I mean, names that everybody knows that people probably don't even realize experience similar situations. Can you guys talk about kind of adding that historical element into it and using that as a way to not necessarily romanticize, but show that there is a beauty almost in the condition that's being depicted. Paul, you may have the
Yeah, well, humanity's most beloved image of the sky was seen through a sanitarium window through Van Gogh's manic eyes. And we'll celebrate that, but then we'll walk by the street and we'll see a homeless man with bloodshot eyes and, you know, a smile looking up at the sky, and we might distance themselves from them. And, you know, 38% of Pulitzer Prize-winning poets, which is, you know, the award given to those who made the biggest contributions to the human spirit, are labeled to have a human disorder. You know, so to bring all that back into the spirit of these characters, it was important to reframe this thing that is so clinical and diagnostic and making these people feel like crippled diseases, so they have an understanding that people feel more human, more of what it means to be alive and human and have rich, deep emotion because of this thing that they're being labeled for.
All right, audience. I'll hand it over to you guys, and you let these folks know what you guys would like to know about Touched with Fire.
For each of you, for all the different parts that you played in bringing this film to life, what was the most challenging aspect for you? On screen or off screen?
Doing it while my wife was pregnant on set as the cinematographer and knowing the birth was coming, and doing the most important scene of the film on the last day while she was going into labor, which was, I had to do it that day. I mean, you know, I mean, it's, and get it right, and being present while not missing the birth of my firstborn was definitely the hardest.
And you made it like within
45 minutes.
Like 45 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the most stressful days of my life because I got a call from Paul.
No, give him the stress. Give it to him. That was his
Fine,
day.
His stress,
it was
his
his day.
Fair enough. He did call me at 3 o'clock in the morning the night before. We were shooting the opening and the closing of the movie that day, and they said, we're going to the hospital, we're going to have the baby, cancel the shoot. And I said, no, we're not canceling the shoot. You're not going to have the baby right now. And they said, no, we're having the baby, cancel the shoot. I said, okay, but I didn't. And then they called me back 2 hours later. I mean, I have 3 kids as well, so I knew they weren't going to have it right then. And then he called me back and said, you didn't cancel the shoot, did you? And I said, no. And then we came in and we had a PA standing outside with the car running, waiting for him to wrap, got in a car and went right to the hospital and was there for the birth of his son. So that was a very stressful day.
I still don't know how I feel about that choice, but I know that the film would not kind of get you at the end and resonate. And I rationalized that was kind of our nest to put the baby in, and if it fell apart, there'd be nothing for us to stand on, which is the truth, you know.
When you say you're not sure how you feel about that choice, what do you mean?
Well,
I mean, we could have canceled the last day and postponed it, but you wouldn't get the performance you needed to get on that last day, and that's the only day you can get that performance. And you'd have to see the film to know why, but I knew that, and that scene was so important that the film would fall apart.
Had we not shot that, Luke was leaving to go to Utah, so we had no option. If we didn't shoot it that day, it was going to have to be pushed for months later, and so we were fighting against that. I mean, but your stress, I knew I was not going to let you miss the birth of your child.
How did your wife feel about all of this?
That was not an option, because I wouldn't be here right now.
Oh, it took a long time for us to get over that one. You know, psychologist, the whole thing. You know.
You can't follow that with any stress. I mean, they win. You win. For sure, for sure.
In terms of the structure, was it more Greek or biblical?
That's interesting you say that, because people who are bipolar live in a mythic world. Joseph Campbell did a study on bipolar and shamanism and was saying that there's a pattern between what happens is you know, the images in front of your eyes vanish and they all take on a mythical meaning. I got obsessed with mythology after I became bipolar, but the Bible is mythology. So they go hand in hand. They're all metaphors for something that's truth. And what happens with someone who's bipolar, often they mistake that truth for fact, and that's why they go crazy and they get lost in it.
All right, as a filmmaker, was there any kind of decision you needed to make to separate what you were shooting in improv versus what you were going to just take care of in post?
I encourage them to improv in just about every scene, just about every camera setup. I encourage them to first improv around the lines. So we got the lines in the can, but even that allowed them to bring their lines to life by being free to, say the lines, but also do other stuff in between. And then in addition to that, I encourage them to have one to just kind of do whatever they wanted. I just think that's a great fundamental principle for filmmaking in general. I do attribute a lot of the amazing performances to that principle. There were obviously in the manic phases, you encourage that a lot more, and also in the some people don't want to do overlapping dialogue with group dynamics because it's hard to edit. I made sure to cover in the camera the lines, when there was no overlap, but I also encouraged the overlap because it really gets the conflict going. When they can overlap over each other and, really let loose. And it definitely felt like the actors weren't restricted because of it.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than hearing on set, "Oh, we'll fix it in post," as an actor, because you just, even though it may be true, you've tried to sort of bring some value to your work, and when you hear it, it just feels completely undervalued. So, credit to Paul for wanting to just keep driving through and, seeking out.
So, this film, just these few clips that we've seen, it's never good when you can see yourself in most of them, but looking in and trying to and being able to put this into a movie with, I can imagine all the, what people feel in a manic state or in a depressive state, to be able to do that and also to be able to share it with the world, so they can see, the talent, the fact that it's out of people's control. Just to be able to, someone directing this with lived experience and then everyone else, learning, I'm sure, a lot, I think is just great. I don't even really have a comment about the film. I just wanted to say that because thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have one more clip before we take the last audience question.
That's a perfect example of the overlapping dialogue.
That's right.
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you for doing this. Katie, earlier you said that you're more than the illness. So as a team, you guys did this. Is there anything more any of you would say to someone who feels that the illness is more than him or herself?
In addition to what Katie's saying is so true, in that you give the person a label and you see them through that lens, as if they are that label, and you miss all the flesh and humanity behind that. But in addition to that, what's difficult for a lot of people who have it to stomach is the fact that it's in their DNA, it's in their genes, it's the way that God, weaved them since the origin of their being, way back down in their family tree. So it's hard to separate yourself from it at the same time when people look at you through that lens. And to know that it's a gift of humanity, to know the humanity that comes out of it, that it's all the emotions that make us human, they just experience to a broader extreme. So, to say that it's that you are not an illness, because how can you call that a human illness if it brought so much humanity to who the rest of are, like Jason, who stole fire from the gods and was burned by it, but managed to bring it to us?
The hope is that people will see this movie and they won't feel ashamed about having this illness. They'll still need to treat it and deal with it, but they won't feel so ashamed to say they have it, or feel so, and hopefully people won't stigmatize them as much if you know someone else that has. So hopefully it expands people's understanding of this, disease that affects 5.4 million people in the United States, and 1 in 4 of them commit suicide. So it's a very serious sort of epidemic that needs to be sort of reframed, the sort of perception of it.
Even doctors telling a patient, you know what, this is a gift we're going to treat as opposed to a disease we're going to terminate. How much different would the patient approach that? Or even a patient saying, I can thrive with this instead of I'm just going to get by with this. Or, the public's appreciation of the beauty allowing these people to come out about it. Because if they don't see the beauty of it, why are they going to come out about it? What are they going to have to be proud of?
Thank you all so much for being here. The movie opens in New York and Los Angeles this Friday and nationwide. Paul, I want to start with you. This movie premiered at South by Southwest last year, so obviously you've lived inside this project for a while. Does it feel like making it was a distant memory? How arduous has the trek been to get it out to the world now that it finally is here or about to be here?
Well, I was doing the editing and the music, which is why it took so long to do the post. Actually on Apple software, Final Cut and Logic. So, but that wasn't a plug. No one told me to do that. But it feels like birth, I guess. I don't know what birth is like, but what I imagine it's like, where the pain is kind of part of the reward when it finally happens.
And now that you've experienced the birth, how easy is it do you think it will be to watch it grow in front of the world?
I imagine like a parent, when the kid finally goes off to college, you kind of want to move on and do something new.
Do you approach it differently in that sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was a dream role because there's just so many layers, and it was an opportunity that I hadn't had like this before, and it was a lot of work, but it was so liberating and wonderful because the environment that we worked in was so freeing, and Paul let us improvise, and Luke was incredibly supportive, as was everyone in the cast and the crew. So we were all able to explore this story that everyone on the set was very, very passionate about.
I think we will go to a clip now. Are you comfortable watching yourself in this context, Katie? I'm always curious of actors, how do you, is it weird to process? You lived inside this experience, and now here it is in a more glossy format for anybody to absorb.
This ability to celebrate and to offer another perspective to so many people about this illness, and I think it was just really inspiring and something that I wanted to be a part of. And Paul gave us so many books and shared a lot of stories, and I still have a lot of poetry books because our characters are, we are more than our illness, and I think that's the theme, one of the themes of this movie. So there was a lot went into it.
Katie, your resume spans so many different types of projects, and I'm curious if a role like this, where you have an obligation to the writer whose personal life is being put onto the screen, compared to some of a lighter, more like studio comedy, a Jack and Jill, a Mad Money, does the role affect you more than certain others do? And how to approach these characters and the project that you guys would create cohesively? Did you guys have questions about what living with the condition is, and what discussions came out of that?
Yeah, Paul and I spent a lot of time walking around the city just kind of getting to know each other and sharing our own, life stories. And he, of course, has a lot to relate about his experience. a lot of the time it's just very specific experiences. Some of it's very, sometimes humorous experiences, sometimes very scary experiences. So yeah, that was very, I think, useful in the building of it all. Yeah.
And when I read this script, I was so moved by the honesty of the piece. And then when I met Paul, he informed me that it was based on his life experiences in it, and told me even more. And I was so inspired by his passion and what he's gone through, and also the.
Katie and Luke, I want to talk to you guys about, this is an interesting movie because you have to chart through so many series, cycles of emotions and ups and downs, and I'm curious, on any given day when you show up to the set, how do you channel how high your character's highs are and how low their lows are so that your performance stays as grounded and specific as they end up being?
Well, we were really fortunate because Paul is a wonderful director, and also because this movie is based on his real life experiences. We could depend on him to help us measure those highs and lows. But also, I mean, we had time to really prepare and really rehearse. So, you look at your week's work on Sunday, and you kind of get ready, and Thursdays that you map it out. So it's you try.
What of Paul's personal experiences did he share with you in approaching